У нас секция двухчасовая посвящена тематике SIEM.
Let's get started. We have a 2-hour session on SIEM systems. So we shall discuss whether they are useful, whether they're another hype designed to extract more money from customers, and I'll ask the participants of this discussion that represent the biggest companies in the market to make their case. So according to Gartner, IBM leads the pack. They are followed by Splunk and HP. And we also have a number of Russian players here today, such as Russia and Positive Technologies. So the gents will now introduce themselves so that you know their faces and you know whom to ask. I've prepared some questions myself. Oh, just in case you don't have questions, I will kick in then. But if you have questions, if you have positive or negative experience dealing with CMs, please ask. Evgeny Aforin, pre-sale engineer of AHP for Arxon, for Russia and the CIS. Now, I've been head of CM implementation department for 3 years, and also worked for 2 years in a bank operating an SIEM system. Vladimir Benging of Positive Technologies. I'm head of sales support department, and I will be fighting for Max Petrol. Alexandra Skakunov of Volgablock. We're a specialized integrator developing systems for Splunk. Roman Andrei from IBM. I assume many people here know me. That's right, but we can't hear you. That has been quite successful trolling. We'll be talking about QRadar. I'm in charge of QRadar, and I've been doing CMs for the last 5 years, or even 7. That's Roman Andrei of IBM QRadar. Hi, I'm Alessa Shelista. I'm one of the founders of SIEM. I'm the ideologist. I've been working with CM systems since 2007. This is not my first product. We've been developing this product since November 2014. What we have now is a set of successful functional installations, not some prototype. Well, the discussion we're going to have now is designed to sort of set the foundation for the upcoming questions. Now, the question I want to ask everybody now will be sort of marketing. They conducted a survey about around 2014, asking 800 companies. And 47 companies said the number of incidents had not been impacted by implementation of SIEM. Would you like to comment on that, please? Do not tout your products at this stage. Please provide an explanation for such horrible news, because thousands, hundreds of thousands of USD had been spent on them, and they don't seem to serve a purpose. Is that a matter of lousy products, lousy customers? And who were the interviewees? Well, they ran the survey globally, Russia included. Well, had it been in Russia, I would say, well, that was like the first wave of a DLP implementation, where you do remember what happened. They simply switched them off because there were too many false positives. That was 2014. So it's pretty difficult to explain in this manner. I think CMs have been discussed since 2006, 2007, so it certainly cannot be the first wave for sure. Then I'm lost. That's right. You can't really explain it like this in 2014 for sure. I think that customers usually expect CMs to be a sort of a silver bullet. Now, if you don't know what you're looking for, it shouldn't be surprising. So you blame it on the clients. Well, I'm not saying they're bad clients, I'm just saying they have inflated expectations. You know, it takes time to understand what a particular solution can provide if it is properly deployed. I have a question for the audience. Raise your hand if you have SIEM implemented. Or maybe we're talking about something you can't really relate to. Maybe you're just waiting here for the next presentation for lack of better things to do. Well, I hope others would want to implement it at least. Raise your hand if you have a definition, corporate definition of information security incidents. Are they codified in your company or not? Would you like to provide your corporate definition? Hi, I'm Alexander Kuznetsov. We're using SIM and we're implementing SIMs for other companies. I think that SIMs are designed to help you timely discover incidents and then investigate them, but they shouldn't really impact the number of incidents as such. We have our own incident descriptions. We don't just monitor everything we have a pretty clear understanding of what, why, and how we collect. We have certain correlation rules, and I assume all the vendors provide pretty much the same set of correlation rules, and this way you start, but then you have to fine-tune it for your business, your model, your threats. Would you like to comment on that, Oleg? I didn't prepare. And nobody on this panel prepared. Do you have a codified definition of incidents in any of the companies that you worked for? Or did you simply use the definitions coming from the vendor? Well, it's just the box we got from the vendor, a PCI DSS certified box though, and we followed by introducing our own modifications. And what kind of difference did it make? Well, we try to integrate SIEM with other business systems and wanted to propose new services to the business based on this technology. Well, I assume it was a kind of a fraud prevention sort of service? Yes, and BI as well. But we didn't really pull it off for a number of external reasons, really. Thank you. Anybody else would want to comment on that? Anybody want to propose his or her definition? Thank you very much for asking this question. I do have a request, though. Let's start with the definition of SIEM, okay? Well, I wanted to avoid this discussion. Well, there is this proverb that if you want to kill your event, start with a terminology debate. I've just checked the vendors' websites. Hewlett Packard, IBM, and SIEM have not been able to come up with a translation. So somebody says it's a system for collecting and analyzing security event information. Or alternatively, it could be a system for managing security events. And we talked to Igor Katenka earlier today. In their research, they say that SIEM is a monitoring and management system for security events. But in a different article, it will be called information management. Who would like to start? Let me start by answering your first question. I actually believe that the numbers you've quoted are quite representative, particularly given the discussion we just have had here. SIEM I'm doing has turned 10 years old in Russia this year, but before that time there were some Cisco systems called the same way. So it's a pretty old kind of system. And 15 years into this sort of phenomenon, having 76% of people quote unhappy about what vendors do, is a real sort of record, an anti-record if you like. CEMs are indeed multifunctional, so it's not surprising that they will be serving different purposes for different companies. Some people see it as an anti-fraud solution that would block things in real time. For others, a CEM is a system that will calculate some security KPIs. For others, it will be good for automated incident discovery, while for others, it's just an opportunity to take stock of whatever happened to a particular router in the course of a single month. And out of 70%, he drops the subject, CEM implementations have a tough time in Russia as well, and quite often we see that CEM systems actually get a second chance later. So what often happens is that they first do a sort of back-asswards implementation where a system would simply do the logging, and CM will enable you to sort of reproduce the context of an attack, say, 3 months ago, and sometime later, like a year or two later, they say, okay, we understand now how we can upgrade the system. So CEMs start developing new functions several years later. So it could actually be good that people sort of misunderstand the function of CEM. Okay, so vendors seem to be saying that customers don't know anything. We are prepared to sell whatever you like, but you shouldn't worry, we'll be able to sell our service on top of the box. So essentially, customers are unhappy. They pay another 100K for a log collector, and then they start coming to an understanding of why they would need a CM. Maybe you should do a better job from the outset, explaining the applicability of CM. I think there are about 30 companies in this country that can properly deploy HPCM, 5 or 6 with a good understanding of process approach. They've got their own auditors. And some partners just sell the box. Why does a vendor put up with this? No, vendors don't put up with this. They train their people. No, they sell the boxes, somebody says. We also try to run a users conference every year. We try to train these people to spark their interest. But it's a difficult task, you do understand that. How would you define CM then? How would you answer the same question? What, in your opinion, is the main function? I'm not asking you to abbreviate this abbreviation. Well, I understand that Search Inform has their own way to abbreviate it, say Search Inform Information Management, but everybody else, I think, has the same definition. But what about the functions? The traditional definition is that a CEM should help you identify, detect information security events, and optimize your responses. However, in this country, CMs are often used to automate information security processes, be it KPI calculation or anti-fraud. And CMs do have such functions built into them. So if you spend this money, you sort of expect CMs to do everything, including brewing coffee. Oh, why not?
Начну и с первых вопросов в том числе. Я с этими цифрами, наверное, не соглашусь.
I don't think I can agree with these numbers. I think everything's actually worse than that. Based on what I have seen in this market, I think we've talked about 100 customers, prospects. Well, I said yesterday that we had 15 successful contracts last year. In many cases, in most implementations, companies already had CMs gathering dust on the shelf. 1 to 20 is my stats. Well, the bigger fans say it's 1 to 10. I believe that only 10%, 1 in 10 CM implementations actually work. I believe that we actually sell by functionality. That we have 400 lines of CM functions. Even cars we buy today have fewer functions, but we do not sell the expertise. You've mentioned out-of-the-box rules, and they do show something during the pilot, but they still have to rework them from scratch. The CMs that I liked, the CMs that could actually work properly, they were supported by groups of about 10 people. These are internal experts. They were not supplied by the vendor or the integrator. They were internal hires. This is something that we often don't like. We being who? Positive technologists. Yeah, I would be happy if other vendors join me in saying that they dislike this paradigm. Very often, customers will say, but a different vendor told us this solution doesn't have this function, but nobody speaks, nobody talks about applicability of this or that function. What about CM definition? Let me answer this question differently. I've heard this answer many times, so I'll give you the answer of a Russian customer. In this country, a CM in most cases is as follows. See, I have this multitude of diverse systems, including routers and switches and networking equipment, operating systems, and proprietary homegrown systems. Now I want to collect all the events, info security events, from all this landscape, feed it to CM so that it sort of brings them to a common representation, because I have 20 types of systems and only 3 info security professionals. Even better if the system can also discover incidents, notify the admins. So it's a silver bullet, isn't it? Absolutely. A silver bullet for dealing with a huge volume of logs from all the systems in a given company.
Много созвучного, наверное, будет от предыдущих выступлений, но мы когда выбирали года 3 назад SIEM для себя...
When we chose a CM for ourselves and our clients 3 years ago, we looked at all the vendors you see here today and a couple of others as well. And the first thing we wanted to do was to come up with long comparative tables in order to discover which of the systems was more functional. And then we realized exactly what you said. That is that the customers would not be able to read these tables.
По степени готовности к внедрению SIEM заказчики разные.
So we decided to stratify customers by their maturity in terms of their readiness for implementation of SIEMs. Some only want to collect in a centralized manner all the logs. Like Lev said, there are customers that want to integrate all the data, business data, marketing data, you name it. So our answer is SIEM is whatever the customer wants today and will want tomorrow in this field. So we see it as a useful tool for increasing the effectiveness of data usage. So in order to avoid selling something a customer doesn't want, we'll look at the current needs and current understanding of the customers. We certainly want to increase the maturity of the customers, but that would be slightly unrealistic. Would you like to comment on that, Roman? Yeah, I will agree with some of the statements for sure. Indeed, many customers believe that SIEM is an advanced log management system. So they use it to automate particular IT processes. They use it to collect stuff about things you don't know. And I often ask him, why do you need all these events? Are you sure you want to really react to them, or is it just log automation or log collection? Just like the other guy said, we first try to identify the things that need to be sort of solved or automated, and based on that, for a particular customer, we will be able to recommend a particular SIEM. After all, SIEMs actually cost you an arm and a leg, and we want our customers to significantly increase their performance thanks to SIEM.
Давайте изначально, почему и откуда вы сформировали SIEM? Изначально задача стояла собрать события, чтобы они не потерялись и иметь возможность...
Well, initially, the idea was to collect information and investigate incidents. Later on, it became clear that customers also wanted real-time notification, real-time alerting for analysts and security officers. Over time, new demands were placed on it. For example, a simple alert about a virus being discovered was not enough. Really, you don't want your admins to rush to the scene every time it happens. Instead, you would want to learn from the system that a virus has been quarantined or disinfected. So these new mechanisms in the info security field became available to businesses. Now, we recently had to explain again and again that SIEM is a useful thing for business. It's not only used for anti-fraud reasons. So we will be collecting business events as well. A recent case in an e-commerce store, say a customer is putting 50,000 rubles worth of goods in his basket, and he sees the regular menu. Would you like to get, say, courier delivery in 7 days or in 2 days? This is very important data for the business because they want to do BI on it.
В информационной безопасности, то, что касается серебряных пулей, коробки и штатов 10 человек. Начнем с того, что штата 10 человек не нужно.
I don't think you really need a count of 10 people. When you implement
При этом
SIEM,
SIEM
you gotta
еще
look at the
рассматривает не
real
как коробочный
context, and SIEM should not be
решение, которое мы поставили,
considered
значит,
a
нам
box out of the box
показывает на
product.
графиках, присылает письма и так далее. К SIEM нужно относиться процессно. Есть кейсы, которые
You need a
интересны.
process-based
Информационной
approach. You
безопасности,
start with a particular case, information security cases, IT cases,
решать на базе этого движка.
testers
И нужно
cases, and so
спрашивать и
on.
требовать от вендора не просто, чтобы поставили и все
So what you gotta demand from the vendor is not an implementation where all the boxes are happily blinking funny lights, but you need to demand from them that they help you set the system up so that your business cases are delivered. Now, it could actually help you decrease your headcount of analysts.
Вы можете, все, наверное, помнят анекдотические случаи, когда
I
в
think
банке
you all remember
сидели
those
девочки,
funny
делали
cases
кат-гриф, да.
where they would employ, where a bank would employ I'm sorry, would do cut grabs.
Открыто 4 окошечка, вот, ну и там кат-гриф. Хожу
Это в банке,
In a bank.
в обычном банке.
In a regular bank. Oh, absolutely.
Да, если нет SIEM, если вы его не
If you
внедряете,
do
да,
not
если
have
вы
CM, if you do not implement it
но хотите
properly,
решать эти кейсы, то
but you
получается
want to
следующая
react
ситуация, с которой мы сталкиваемся
to
регулярно. Берут какой-то
info
решок,
security
берут,
incidents, you have to do
open
that.
source SIEM и
To take an
пытаются
open
найти
source
салоны
CM.
и веток сделать нечто подобное решение. А что будет с человеком? Я смотрю на эти процедуры, на эти самописные скрипты.
And then look at these procedures
Там двое человек, которые делают. Посчитайте,
and their
зарплату,
homegrown scripts.
посчитайте, насколько это
If
стабильно.
if they leave the
Посчитайте,
bank,
что
if they leave
будет,
the
если,
company,
вы просто
they're
это
doomed.
решение выбросите в мусор.
It's such an expensive loss will be for the corporation,
Да.
completely commensurate with their salaries. We have a question from the audience. He's actually one of the biggest customers. Not customers, but testers, rather. I think we tested ArcSight from your competitor about 8 years ago. We're running a pilot now with Positive Technologies. So what's the underlying philosophy here? What is it that we need here, do you think? We have a huge system with a huge flow of information, including information security. Very often, it's simple business data that you can process using a SIEM system or what we call an expert system. Unfortunately, the words have been tarnished because they used to promote them for bad applications. But everything develops in a spiral. And they have these super expert systems like Watson, and they can process pretty much anything. With the current flow of security events, you can't really manage them with 10, 20, or even 500 information security experts. Well, I'm referring at least to my company. We have 500 people across the country. So the only solution to that is to compress it all, so that you can better analyze it. So if it takes this engine and commits the data to a given log, it's already good enough, but we need analytics. And in order to use analytics, you need to have the qualifications of the developer. And developers usually have doctoral degrees in a given area. And in order to actually work on systems like this, you need much better skills, and we can't really afford that given the high turnover. Ideally, you want to put all the information on the screen so that SIEM processes all the information, displays it, so that we can see that in this tax inspectorate, for example, we have issues, so that we can react to it. And ideally, SIEM should tell us what should be the best countermeasure. And ideally, for us, the person working in a particular tax inspectorate shouldn't be very highly qualified, because if he's really good, he would find a better employment elsewhere. I hope I haven't made anybody unhappy with my comment. Oh, you've said a lot. Well, the panelists here have asked for a scuffle, so try to instigate one. So these are the numbers from Cisco infrastructure. Quite a lot, right? So we're talking billions in a single day. Well, obviously, a system has to collect this data, it has to normalize it, analyze it, correlate them. And this makes me think of a recent Kiwi presentation. Kirill Yermakov, the head of security, said that in any SIEM system, all correlation rules are junk. If a person who comes up with correlation rules has never done any pen test, he will not be able to come up with adequate rules. With rules that would enable to discover ongoing attacks rather than extrapolate something from a handful of events. So you need to have a hacking experience to produce good SIEM. Is that your case? Do you have your own hackers who would sort of transmit their hacking knowledge to the SIEM correlation rule engine? Or do you mostly operate on the assumption that you provide 100 rules outside the box, and then you will be prepared when the customer is unhappy with these rules to sell your services on top of that for twice the price of the product itself, to help the customer properly code in their right business rules? Yeah, let me start then. I think everybody knows that Positive Technologies are one of the best pen testers in this country. We have over 100 pen testers on staff, and this is a huge amount of expertise. So when we first developed a SIEM system, we had a clear focus on putting this knowledge into SIEM. What's paradoxical is that 90% of all pen tests we do are successful within a week. Very often we know nothing about the infrastructure. It takes us less than a week to reach the domain controller. But then it turned out that it's very difficult to translate this knowledge into SIEM correlation rules, because a SIEM will only work if it knows everything about the infrastructure. In order to build a SIEM that knows everything about the infrastructure, you need to be a god, because infrastructure is dynamic. In large corporations, it will change pretty much every minute. That's why we started developing a totally different SIEM. So we wanted our expertise to be reflected in this product. But for us, it will include all these functions such as vulnerability, asset management. This is exactly what Max Patrol does. It's a huge platform that will know a lot about the infrastructure, and then it will be able to discover the incidents that we're so good at creating. I remember a table we had in Excel, 500 or 600 lines, that contains individual building blocks of a pen test. In only 2% of cases we were discovered, although we did it for large companies that have CMs. So these are well-known building blocks and they don't work because a CM is only reliable when it controls a whole infrastructure. In order to do that, it has to be more than a CM. Well, I see that Alessia has been shaking her head throughout your passionate speech. Give him heat.
Я соглашусь с тем, что источники, дополнительная информация,
additional information on assets and vulnerabilities never hurts a CM, that's certain. But I will keep insisting, and I can quote particular examples, don't, okay? That out-of-the-box rules will not work. I think it's a 60-40 rules. 60% of vendor rules you can dump right away. Even when you have collected all the information on the current infrastructure, you will not be able to properly use all these rules. Now, some companies want to see virus information, others don't. Somebody runs web servers to SAN servers, others don't. Hardware information is certainly useful and certainly can be used. But claiming they absolutely need all the hardware data in order for CM to work, well, it could be useful to know that your hardware is running Microsoft Office, but the other sort of information I think is ridiculously unneeded. Now, for example, if we're dealing with a fenced-off computer that is not talking to anybody else, why do you care? So all the information and the information you collect that could be used to prioritize incidents in order to identify whether it is or it is not an incident should be collected. Information about versions or services, information on vulnerabilities, do collect it for sure. Additional information on what chassis your server is running, I don't think many people here would want that. I'll hand over to the guys in a sec. Well, they say that they leverage their penetration experience, and you seem to believe it's useless. How do you build your correlation rules, or is it done by the customers? Well, obviously, vendor correlation should be based on pen testers' experience. I don't think that a student, a greenhorn, will be able to come up with proper correlation rules. Customers, by the way, should be properly educated. If a customer doesn't have experts in network security and application security, well, then he can sort of split it the way they do it in Kiwi. Obviously, every customer is special and has a special business, and I do believe that correlation rules need to be developed by the experts on the client side. If the client hires students for the information security department, why do they need a CM? CM requires a particular maturity level. Maybe that's why we have such a high number of failures. So after you implemented it, it gave you a string of false positives, so you start disregarding it and then you switch it off. And I think a vendor package is extremely important. But then it can give you falses, right? 60% of vendor rules you'll have to adapt or switch off.
Как у вас выстроен процесс создания правил?
Now, how do you go about your rules? Well, I used to be an IT guy. I did 1S.
И вопрос написания кода кастомного, который автоматизирует бизнес-процесс заказчика.
So the matter of coming up with custom code that would automate customers' business processes is quite characteristic of CEMs. Because the correlation logic that a vendor, a partner, or an OEM will build into the rules is a code, right? And very few people are actually good at coming up with good code. So it's only natural that customers try to delegate this function to somebody. Given the price they pay for CM, it's all logical. CMs are not the most expensive kind of solution in the security market, although they can be quite expensive.
Смысл в том, что как только мы начинаем писать универсальный контент,
Once we start trying to produce universal, one-size-fits-all content, it becomes useless. If we try producing specialized content, then we will have 3070 rule. Now HP has a situation center that processes about 44,000 events per day and discovers about 130 incidents per day. Is that inside Hewlett? That's right. This is 130 incidents only. Interesting.
в этом плане есть три направления, которые можно пытаться.
So I believe there are three possible venues here. You can first look at special cases such as DNS analysis or behavioral analysis that you can do in a SIEM, but it will be much more efficient for you to actually use a specialized solution for that, for behavioral user analysis, user behavior analysis, or DNS. And it's improper for CIEM to actually try to be everything for everybody. Information security is a huge field, and you can't be perfect across the board. So it is imperative for CIEM to focus on what they do best, which is collection, automation, correlation, instant response, and forensics. Well, there are configuration analytics out there. There are DNS response systems. Why don't you simply integrate with them? They will be better at what they do if they are such narrow-focused products. If you have a recurring incident on your network, and most incidents fall into this category, fortunately, we do not deal with targeted attacks very often. But most incidents are kind of vulgar, banal, when you have a GSM modem being connected, or when people install malicious software, or there is some malicious activity on the network. Usually, they come in droves. And if you have done your investigation, you would want to build the new logic into the correlation rules. Who should do that? Well, it should be done by the customer together with the partner. Vendors will naturally want to do something about it. HP, for example, has a methodology called HP Activate for developing proper content. We're trying to teach our customers and partners how to properly come up with sensible correlation rules, so that will be easier for the customer to operate and for the partner to support them. Well, you have communities such as Facebook, Twitter. We do user forums. We do threats and trials, a cloud forum, where you can actually exchange signs of signs of penetration, so to speak, right? You can exchange user data even. This way, incident discovery and incident response become stronger. Of all the three speakers, I probably prefer positive technologies approach most because you sell your solution, you teach the customer and the partner to come up with the rules, and you're not to blame if anything happens, right? You've sort of socialized the losses or socialized the responsibilities. We say the customers should come up with the code themselves. Well, we teach them and we give them the tools for that.
российских, в том числе, мы очень эффективно работаем в каком-то сжатой сроке.
I think Russians are extremely effective when deadlines are pressing. There's so much we can do in a matter of 2 days. There is something we can learn, though, from our foreign friends, such as being consistent, brushing your teeth every day, washing your hands every day. If we don't change, we won't become more effective, I'm afraid. Much has been said already. People have already mentioned out-of-the-box rules. I keep saying this joke. We've come up with a universal shaving machine, but everybody's head is different. Now this one is really universal. We know from practice that out-of-the-box rules can only be good to show the basic functionality of a system in a very much optimized environment. In a real-life infrastructure, most of the rules will have to be written from scratch. But the out-of-the-box rules can be used as a crib sheet. And who has to do that? Is that the customer? I think that all Western vendors have similar approach. We are also teaching our partners and our customers. We provide our own services. And it's a matter of the right choice. As regards writing those correlation rules, you need to distinguish between different drivers for the client. It could be matters of compliance or discovered vulnerabilities or the results of a pen test. And in some cases, customers don't want to have a holistic solution, but they want to patch up as much as they can in a matter of 2 days. So you never know, right? It falls to the customer to decide how they want to structure their system, whether they want to automate everything, what they actually want to get the most out of their SIEM system. Now, how does Splunk go about it? So far, I'm hearing a pretty depressing story. What we're hearing is that it all falls on the shoulders, so to speak, of the customer, but if the customer doesn't have programming experience, for him, SIEM is a pretty expensive toy that simply collects logs, normalizes information, and this is it. So they first pay for SIEM, then they pay for implementation, then they pay for support. This must be a great idea for the vendor, but not so great for the customer. Well, partners also make money, but we do understand that you cannot really come up with all the rules at the implementation stage. So much of this rule writing will need to be performed later, often by the client himself. Well, applying those out-of-the-box rules is
еще несколько вариаций на тему пропорций между теми.
Продолжал аналогию романа. В каком контексте?
is like attaching artificial hair to totally, or trying, I'm sorry, using a hair iron to curl your hair if you're totally bald. That's what he said, right? Even the 20% of out-of-the-box rules that I think can be useful can be quite difficult to find. So in order to be successful in a SIEM implementation, you need to meet several criteria at the same time. With Splunk, we have 1,500 people doing it. They're also trying to put good rules into the box, and I think that they will mean about 20 or 30% of your overall success. And the rest is about methodology, is about attitude. Because we certainly want to avoid a situation where you need a doctoral degree to operate a SIEM system. So the approach of Splunk is such that once Splunk goes away, customers should be able to adapt to the system to make it bigger and better. So we want it to be user-friendly enough so that you know your business, you don't have to be system administrators. And Splunk today does, for example, user behavior analytics. And there is a point to doing that, there is sense in doing that. For example, when you have great IPS systems in place that generate good events, but sometimes you have this bare metal infrastructure where you don't have any attack analyzers or what have you. So we still need to collect this information silo. That's why you're that. A question from the audience. Aparin Oleg from Yevrosit. I think my question is sort of fundamental. I've heard many phrases coming from you guys about a process-based approach. I've heard you say that vendors are trying to teach the end user, which sounds great. But in your opinion, is SIEM a matter of management, or is it just an out-of-the-box product? You mean a process or a product? That's right. I think he said it's a product without the rules, and you will be charged for rule development as well. Would you like to comment on that? Well, this makes me think of a session yesterday where we discussed security service providers. And somebody said that maybe, somebody said, we'll look for an out-of-the-box service and we don't want to customize it. SOC, for example. And that could actually explain at least some of the failures. So they have template agreements, they have template service, and their full customers usually choose based on price or reputation, and they don't want to change anything. But what often happens as well is that they can't change anything. These are the two significant, if you like, drivers on the customer side.
Коробка, ну, конечно, это коробка с процессом, то есть
And I believe it's a product with a
ну,
process
точно
in
не
it.
коробка.
It's
Однозначно
certainly
процесс,
not a bare metal
это может быть
product.
действительно как вот коробка без наполнения, да, но
Just like the gentleman to your left said, it could be an empty box, but it should be filled with a process.
туго покажешь.
Я попробую очень коротко, но
I'll try to be short.
у меня возникла аналогия.
I have an analogy for you.
Ну да, про бигуди. Лысые головы, бигуди, стриженные, все разное. А давайте представим, что мы тут не вендоры SIEM,
Well, imagine we're not SIEM vendors here.
энтузиасты, мы верим в свое будущее.
Or maybe positive technologies people are so enthusiastic.
Но представим, что мы
But let's imagine we're AV vendors.
Мы не можем написать
And say we have great tools, but we can't come up with the right signatures because everybody's infrastructure is different. And we can't really write new detects for viruses because they've only been available in telecoms. But IPS products work out of the box. And say, well, right, they say 100 rules generate falses, but 10,000 rules do not. And nobody complains about that. And say, well, we're teaching the customers to bring this expertise on board. This must be a utopia, or maybe we are the only ones doing it. Then I should be happy.
Смысл в том, что антивирусные вендоры IPS, они работают очень узко.
Well, AV vendors and IPS vendors have a very narrow niche, and it's very easy to reproduce results where they work. A CM is very different. We're talking about 15 or even 30 types of systems. These are security systems, infrastructure, business applications. And what's key here is that the whole shebang is changing very fast. Customers that have bought CM, they start implementation with the simplest things like collecting security incident information.
И поэтому, например, если на этом уровне сделать заказчик, я хочу не коробку, чтобы она работала.
So if a customer at this level says, I want to buy a box, it will be a box. IBM, HP, and some Russian companies that I have full trust in. I'm actually very patriotic about them. And I think CMs have reached the level that's sort of sufficient for this kind of demand. Well, they are not up to scratch yet, some of them. Well, HP is closest, obviously, to that level of demand. When you want more from your CM, such as a risk analysis or a compliance, well, you certainly need more processes on top of that. And successful projects, successful companies are the ones that apply project-based approach. I'm often asked how many analysts you need for a CM system. Well, they say that an Israeli SQL server returns a query with a query. And I ask, well, how much time do you have? If you have 2 hours per week to react to an incident, just select the most important one. 3 months later, you will be able to talk to your bosses and say, you know what, we have had all these incidents, we have reacted to them, and we've been able to drive down the number of incidents because we are penalizing them, we are de-incentivizing them or whatever, and the number of incidents has gone down. Shall we focus now on this area or that area, or do you actually want me to hire more people to do that? So if you start doing it, you can easily add correlation, anti-fraud, business processes, user behavior analysis, ACS, God forbid. Now, if you do not develop your customer like this, well, the customer will stay at the out-of-the-box level. And several years later, they'll have a different CIO, and you will talk to them differently. And the platform will support this kind of automation as well. I think this should give you an exhaustive answer. Well, geopolitically, our country now is in a pretty difficult situation. And Western companies are finding it very difficult to operate in Russia. And Russian companies are doing sort of better now, right? We have 6 or 7 Russian CMs in the market now. 2 of them, or representatives of 2, are sitting in the panel. And the main motivation for CM implementation has not been mentioned here yet for some reason, and I'm referring to compliance. That is staying on the good side of the regulator, be it ISO 27001, FISMA, what have you. It's a compliance thing. We need it for paper security. And this is why companies are so happy to actually spend money on CM. Many auditors don't care how you set up your CM system. They just tick it off. You have a CM, you can go to stock exchange. Well, there is no compliance in Russia yet. Well, I mean, there is FSTEC. That sort of requires it now, but the requirements of FSTEC are not that binding at this stage. So I want to ask Alessa, and after that, guys from Positive. How did you come around? How did you come to this idea that you need a CM? And do you feel any competition coming from the other Russian clients, Russian vendors? Or do you believe you've got a great advantage and everybody will have to sit in the second row? I talk a lot. Can I hand it over? I will escalate the mic. We started the whole thing in November 2014 thanks to the sanctions, because there were customers for that. So based on the products we had before that, we deployed our first system in a state-run organization. And since we had to deliver on the order contracts, and what was the problem? Just imagine. I talked to IBM, Hewlett and McAfee, and I tell them, I've got a great customer, I need to implement a CM system, and these guys produce tanks and fighter jets. Nobody was there to help us. So we had to develop it on our own. And I think Alessa will be able to answer the rest of the questions. I started developing CM when I worked at Positive. And I realized that there are limitations to existing products, and the current vendors have reached their limits. They've exhausted their potential. But take McAfee, for example. They've reached their ceiling. You don't see any evolution from them. Now, if you read their Twitter, they just publish the same news over and over again. They don't forget to delete these same old ones, but this doesn't change much. There are numerous cases that are of big interest to the customers. They want more than just visibility of their incidents. Well, there were cases where analysts would read the logs and go crazy, undress, and run away into the forest. I hope it was a real case.
SIEM, который будет
So I really wanted to develop a SIEM system that would help the clients. Alright, so these guys are not helping anybody, is that what you imply? Well, they do, but I've got my own development plans, I know which features to add.
и
We go way beyond the logging
пойти
function.
немножко дальше. И я пытаюсь вложить, собственно, в свой продукт эти фичи. Ну и,
So I'm trying to build these features into my product. And these geopolitical changes have been an important driver. But you were not able to launch it at Positive Technologies. Now, Positive Technologies, would you like to retort? That's why we are successful doing it.
Ну что же,
Что вас подвигло на...
Now, what stimulated you guys?
очень обидное слово импортозамещение.
Well, import substitution, in my opinion, is a horrible term.
Хочу работать и
I actually want to develop something that will fly internationally.
и все эти
All this import substitution BS
что-то местное ради чего-то там прикрыть.
reeks of something local, something that wouldn't be good enough internationally.
Продукт на мировой уровень.
And I want our products to be internationally successful.
И мы, собственно, амбициозны. И также
I think we're quite ambitious in that respect.
говорим о том, когда мы хотим выйти на зарубежный рынок. Да, и это
Moreover, we have specific plans for attacking international markets and will be very active late next year. This is how we put our other products on the foreign markets.
8 классический.
This is the case for Max Petrol 8, for example.
И вообще всю мы точно так же будем
So
говорить
our platform, our CM platform, will go internationally. Chances are we won't even position it as CM because we don't like it in the current market. And I think we are changing it quite successfully.
задолго до импортозамещения.
And we started our developments well before the geopolitical changes. Now, Roman,
Сейчас
how are Western vendors doing now in Russia?
ваших коллег, которые
Do you have any particular difficulties?
своих заказчиков, сталкиваетесь ли вы с ними? Или вы живете с...
Do you meet your Russian rivals when you meet your potential clients? Well, first, guys, please don't quarrel, okay? I think there will be enough place for pretty much everybody in this market.
Ну, на самом деле судить довольно сложно, потому что,
It's difficult for me to make any judgment here.
ну, опять же, потребность рынка накладывает свои, так сказать, отпечатки. То есть западные вендоры, ну, понятно, что мы действительно там столкнулись с определенными вопросами, скажем так.
Well, as a Western vendor, we have had some difficulties, there is no doubt about that.
И в связи с этим, скажем так, уровень заказчиков, те заказчики, которые имеют определенное видение того, как они уже используют свою инфраструктуру, как они дальше будут
So the clients that we still work with,
понимают, что
most of them at least, have a very clear understanding of what they want to do in the future with their systems.
плюс-минус созревшие.
So most of them are pretty mature.
Те заказчики, которые еще где-то на перепутье находятся,
Well, the less mature customers,
будут разные решения, в том числе
well, I understand they will want to experiment with different solutions, not necessarily coming from Western vendors. Well, that's their choice.
Первое, что я хотел бы сказать, на самом деле, то, что римские
Well, the first thing I wanted to say was that Roman legends, quite some time ago, proved quite convincingly that a properly organized army
сражениями более российского противника.
can easily beat superior enemy forces. So, foreign vendors can be big, but that doesn't necessarily mean Russian companies should be scared. Kaspersky Labs, I think, has shown it quite convincingly. However, pains of growth should be contemplated. The amount of resources you require different stages is different, and routines you need will also change. Now, choosing products only out of patriotic feelings sounds suboptimal. Well, I can tell you that all the products in a Russian SIEM system, I click through them in a matter of 15 minutes. Well, this is bad.
Если он русский, значит, он побеждает в любом случае. Она очень опасна. Она может убить вот этого вот
I think it's actually bad for the industry when you focus on a particular geography of vendors. Well, HP and IBM do not really mean evil to anybody. And HP actually invited FSB or KGB officials so that they could inspect our source code. We also work with local OEMs so that they could use HP code in what they produce. So we try to be sort of good corporate citizens. So it's good that we have competition. We keep each other in a pretty good shape, and clients will benefit from competition. And I think it's pretty stupid to buy stuff only from a supplier of a particular origin, be it a Russian company or what have you. Well, because you certainly don't want to end up in a situation where you have a magic bullet and you don't know how to use it. My name is Nikolai, I'm from Home Credit. And who do you think should know more about SIEM? Is that the client or the integrator? I actually believe that if the experts on the client side don't know the products, don't know the system well enough, you won't be able to succeed. Well, you sort of said that homegrown stuff doesn't work. In my experience, it works better than out-of-the-box vendor solutions. Well, you certainly run the risk of losing expertise when people go, but you can certainly adapt it to the current situation. My question now about Russian vendors. It's well known that RusSIEM and Max Patrol are based on Elasticsearch as their core. So I'm wondering whether this creates any licensing issues for you. Do you do any forks in the search function? Will they be open source or not? Well, Nikolai is one of the people who is actually developing this Russian SIEM. I mentioned there were 8 SIEM projects in Russia. Well, we started out using ALK, and then we had to throw it away. And we produced our own stuff, that's right. We have our own correlations. And we are partially using databases of Elasticsearch, that's right. We certainly do the fork. We check the release. We change the functionality, or rather adapt it.
Если касаться Elasticsearch, здесь никаких проблем нет.
On the Elasticsearch side,
Другие базы
licensing
данных
is
мы
not
также
an issue at
используем,
all.
также
We do
используем
use other
Postgres,
databases.
мы также используем свою базу данных.
We use our own database.
Самописано.
Да,
A
самописная
proprietary one,
такая
that's
база
right,
данных,
a
которая
homegrown
хранится в
database.
формате файловой системе, это у нас используется для аналитики. То есть уже
Защищенную операционную систему вы не пишете еще?
Have you already produced a secure operating system? Not yet.
То, что касается импорта замещения, да,
Too many things on our hands at
здесь
this
не
time.
нужно с такими горящими глазами бежать, я Спарта, да, я русский, вот все должно быть русское и так далее.
Well, we certainly should be more cool about this patriotic thing, and we recently invited to put our CM on Elbrus. We looked at how Java is run on Elbrus and we said no, never.
Вы отказались от денег.
You said no to money. Oh yes, we did.
Он в шоке просто.
Да, ну, нет, мы используем Java, да, все используют Java.
Well, we use Java. Everybody uses Java.
Значит, open source и так далее, ну, это нет. Мы используем другие компоненты.
We use other open source components, not just Elasticsearch. And there are issues with them for sure. Because you need to develop a separate repository, you need to develop a fork, then you check it, you update it. Because in a system like SIEM, you simply cannot reuse an existing component. This is not how things are done. We do use Elasticsearch database. We've nearly reached its limits, and I think that very soon we'll need to choose whether we want to develop something of our own or not. I actually believe it's an IT software, right? And HP also started out using a third-party database before they developed their own. And interestingly, nobody here uses their own operating system. Kaspersky does. Well, I mean, none of the panelists here. Well, Kaspersky in this respect is really awesome. But here, on the sofa, nobody does. We are information security vendors. Now, we can try being everything for everybody. Like, we have our own drivers, so we have our own access to the protocol stack, and we can try developing our own operating system. That would be a mistake. We've always been IaaS vendors, and this is what we shall stay.
Это вот то, что стоит уже на границе. Потому что из того, что мы сейчас получаем от Elasticsearch, как мне говорят разработка, это уже будет некий край. Да? Дальше надо будет двигаться дальше. Собственно, вот и все.
Понял. Ну, раз зашли там, технические вопросы, у меня, собственно, вопрос ко всем. Да?
I actually have a question to all the vendors now.
Одна из основных задач, особенно в распределенной архитектуре, это синхронизация времени. Одним из инструментов...
Time synchronization and the distributed architecture is one of the key sort of challenges in a CM. Well, usually we use navigation systems such as GPS. And now, with input substitution and sanctions, a number of customers today say that they want to do time synchronization through GLONASS. How'd you do that, guys?
Поддерживаете GLONASS, либо у вас вообще что-то свое с точки зрения системы точного времени. То есть кто готов?
Who would like to do that?
На самом деле этот вопрос, он меня как заказчик интересовал несколько лет назад. И у нас есть неплохие компании, которые изготавливают комплайенсы, которые умеют синхронизироваться по GPF.
Well, actually, we have a number of companies that are quite good at syncing via GPS or GLONASS. And I really love the way they've implemented it. And we have our own loggers, CSN Express. We have software solutions for that. So, for example, if the operating system knows it has correct time, it's doing fine then. So most of the syncing is done at the operation system level. There are two answers to your question. On the one hand, we love collecting the time of the incident and not the time when we collected it, which makes us different from some vendors.
Это во-первых. А во-вторых, у нас, собственно, из-за того, что мы говорили с самого начала, сегодня на рынке все очень просят именно вот этот гибкий функционал. Я сам хочу сделать как мне
Now, everyone in the market really wants the flexibility, the agility, they want a light bulb to go on in their office, or they want, for example, an SMS notification. So we have developed an open API for inputs and outputs. You can connect even to the bus level in our system. So you can easily sync to any source, no problem.
Даже еще короче, то есть, ну, действительно, это метки в самых событиях, поэтому неважно как позитива. Плюс, кроме API, все возможные интеграции с
And most integrations have already been performed. So the only thing we haven't integrated yet is SIEM-based hourglass. So this is how we do normalization. When I say normalization, I mean bringing all to a common format, but synchronization is different. Everybody seems to be using the same time format.
И события, которые дошедшие до Москвы или произошедшие в Москве, чтобы ты их мог нормально синхронизировать, чтобы они были в связке в корреляционной системе, как один инцидент.
So if your syncing works fine, you will be able to see a string of related incidents. Well, indeed, we should be able to see using external data. And you're using external system, that's right?
Мы опираемся на системное время, и настройка системы всегда требует синхронизации с NTP серверами. Какие-то будут...
Yes, we do syncing through an MTP servers. And it doesn't really matter which they are. They could be located in France or Germany, or they could be local domain controllers. And we use several timestamps, that is when the event occurred and when it was collected centrally, and we bring all the time to GMT basis, so to speak, and at the same time we indicate the time zone. And GMT seems to be the common denominator for everybody. Absolutely. When you need to compare two events that happened in Kamchatka and Moscow, it seems to be the most rational choice. Which means that you've never really done it of carriers networks, right? Because they usually use GMT plus 3 as the basis. I can't hear you, Dennis, without a mic.
Буквально вчера, позавчера достаточно много стали говорить о том, что, до этого говорили, а вчера как бы опять прошла очередная новость.
Well, I heard it yesterday that semantic AV has been shown to contain a serious vulnerability. So my question to everybody here.
До огромного количества.
So it's a tool that allows you, as an octopus, to reach out to a whole lot of different solutions, not only in read-only mode to collect event, but also in control mode, to do the config of the operating system, to control access lists of routers, and so on and so forth. How do you protect your systems from unauthorized access? Because taking control over SIEM means taking control over the entire infrastructure. So how does every one of you, if you of course are prepared to discuss that, how does every one of you implement the protection mechanism with your own team? Or if you use some third-party tools, SIGNet, Accord, or anything else? Alice, from yourself. Well, we of course use a number of tools in order to identify the temporal vulnerabilities of the operating system, of the software. We use, sometimes it happens that customers send us information after using some scanners when they find some false positives and they say you have a vulnerability. We explain that we do have this vulnerability, but it can't be exploited because actually there are either no components for that or something else. If we leave an unpatched VM or provide an image of an unpatched product, our customers are actually quite mature enough, so as to complain about that. So we have vulnerability, it needs to be closed, how soon are you going to fix it? As to the access codes, either to VMs or to other things, of course, we cut network connections and other connections that can be exploited to penetrate the SIEM. Just yesterday, I think, in one of the sessions, there was a statement that some SIEM has passed one vulnerability that worked in the SIEM as such. So there was an exploit who could come to an event, triggered by an event to the browser, sending the user through the same logger command, which is logo, to SIEM, and because the event got in plain text, the operator could respond and trigger this exploit. Naturally, inside there's a form validation, input data, output data validation, and in the process of normalization, these fields are also taken care of. So that's basically it, very briefly. As to additional things, we don't use any other things. If the product is not a hardware appliance or a VM, so I'm sorry if there's a vulnerability in the hypervisor on the VM, so the malefactors will hardly be able to get to that. Thank you. Talking about co-radar, we also use a secured version of the operating system. We use the standard integrity control mechanisms. We only use trusted builds. Of course, we cut network connections. This is a standard approach. And the data that can become available from SIEM, well, again, there are tools to secure them. Logins and passwords that are used to access the system. Of course, they're encrypted. And if the customer really wants to secure the data from third parties, there's a mechanism to close this data. So the data is encrypted and only gets into the system as a hash. So even if a person gets access to the SIEM system and to the event that are stored there, then without knowing the private key, and of course it has to be kept in some secure place, so they won't be able to get access to the sensitive data, such as logins and passwords that can be mentioned in some events. So the functionality is there. As to the protection of the SIEM system, we shouldn't forget about that. It's a critical system, and you need to pay due attention to it. Sorry, a question immediately to you. Who of you has a separate guide for the security of the SIEM solution? Co-radar? No, I'm not in the know. I'm not aware. Okay, go on. So taking the infrastructure security out of the brackets that my colleagues have mentioned, everything to do with dropping the unneeded packets at the level of the operating system security, then the functionality of a Splunk as self-security can identify the module of Plank over Plank. which tracks the user activity and the correctness of the role model as such. The role model can secure user access both logically and physically, and also data availability in different instances, also including classifying them by the degree of sensitivity, and also integrity control that exists in buckets that can be hashed so that any attempt to access them could become an incident. You shouldn't forget that having once written some raw data, you put them in a situation where they can become input information for next attempts and are themselves becoming sensitive for further attacks.
So it's very easy to compromise the work of SIEM and the verdicts it issues, and you can also provide for control of the data at the level of applied cryptography. So obviously we're referring here to SSL and access control, including role-based access control. Now, I can spend a lot of time detailing and all that, but you know what? I worked for an integrator for so many years, and I know that so many DLP systems actually have password admin by default. So what I'm saying is that so much is really dependent on how you deploy a SIEM system. In most cases, you will be dealing with infrastructure problems. You know, they tell everybody don't use default passwords, but everybody keeps doing that. You know, I ran this experiment. Passwords is used pretty much all over the place. And since SIEM is an infrastructural solution, we have to work with it in an infrastructural manner. So critical white data, so to speak, will be stored somewhere, and you need to protect it properly. So what stops you as a vendor from developing a tool that would make the admin change the password every 90 days? Why do you need to impose it on somebody else? Yeah, you absolutely need to do it in the system, and I have to recognize that our system currently doesn't have it. That's why we have admin passwords. I've seen them myself. And I don't think we will be able to solve this problem infrastructurally, because pen testers will break through the operating systems and the vulnerabilities they have. So we started out by asking a question of whether you can hack a SIEM. And SIEM is a sophisticated solution using all sorts of code. So if you look for well-known SIEM vendors and their vulnerabilities, you will see that they have accesses, a web interface, or something. So what does HP do in this respect? Well, we have a bulletin where we report on all discovered vulnerabilities in HP products. We also publish patches that you can deploy yourselves, or as we update our appliances, we can do it for you. And this is how you can remove Poodle or Heartbleed. Inside SIEM, we use two-factor authentication, MFA. In ArcSight, use two ports, 8343 and 9343, and all the traffic there is encrypted. So in order for connectors to be able to connect, they will be checking the certificates. And certificates are stored there in a secure manner. Now, passwords, logins are stored at connector level. And here we expect to work with you guys. We never demand admin rights to access audit events. But partners and clients often use them because it's easier. Don't do that. That's bad practice. We obfuscate logins and passwords. They are never stored in plain text. And if you do not have admin access to ArcSight, you can still sleep well at night. Now, ArcSight runs on a system without privileged rights. So if you break up, for example, ArcSight using buffer overflow or by exploiting some SSL vuln, you won't be able to do much. The installation instructions tell you which ports to close, which ports to open, what kind of file rights to issue, to keep the whole thing secure. Now, if we are discussing the data available in the system, it will be, what is it? Access rights, data obfuscation. We had this recent case when a Russian operator has a subsidiary in the Ukraine, tried to build a global data center, and the Ukrainian sub said, no way, won't give you our data, it's Ukrainian, you're Russians. So they had this discussion about Ukrainian data actually going through obfuscation, so that Russians would get hash data only and would run reports based on hashes. What's the point of correlating obfuscated data? Well, for example, if a perp is using a logging for brute force, but what's the point of obfuscating IP addresses? Well, 192.168.1.1 will have one hash that will be sort of different from 192.168.1.2. So once it has been discovered, a security incident, you will send it over to the people who will be able to work with it. Most of the products that are in the right-hand top Gartner quadrant, they have pretty good tools for fighting external and internal threats. Thank you. I've got a question regarding correlation rules here. These beautiful stats show the correlation between Internet Explorer market share and murder rate. So you do see it's nearly 100% correlation. What about this one? There's a correlation between US spending on science and suicide rate in the same country. So you can argue that the smarter the country, the more suicides they will have. And this makes me think of the old Solomon's adage, that there is so much sorrow in so much wisdom. That could be true, right? But chances are it's just a happenstance. Not like the murder rate correlation. This begs several questions. The first one is pretty simple. You all guys in your website say we collect 30,000 events per second or 50,000 events per second. That could be a good indicator for marketing purposes. But for real practical purposes, what kind of good does it make? Because the more data you collect, the more strain exponentially you will put on the system. The more rules you have, the slower the system will be. How do you fight this problem? SIEM system load is multi-pronged, so to speak. First is data collection. Next is content execution and service functions, something you can predict, although it's more difficult. There are two components that are impossible to predict. One is the execution of unusual content, because you can actually develop correlation rules that will kill the system or kill a particular report, and you all propose outside the box, so to speak, unusual rules. Why CMs have gone away from relational databases? What Oracle does: thousands of users, minimize query sizes, while in SIEMs, every query results in gigabytes of data. You have only 5 or 6 users and generate a number of smaller requests, right? But that's why all vendors of CMs are using now their proprietary databases. So different analysts do it in different manners, and it's nearly impossible to predict the load. This is something that you need to keep in mind in order to develop the right storage system and in order to ensure proper performance. Well, actually, you can block access for your analyst to a specific source of data so that he doesn't play with it, he doesn't put extra load on the system. ArcSight has an internal sort of self-inspection module. So, for example, if a rule fires 10,000 times in a second, it will actually kill the rule automatically and will inform you about that so that you don't shoot yourself in the foot. We invest a lot in training people so that they can come up with good content. I'll be frank with you. I've personally trained 33 people in 5-day courses. I personally taught them how to come up with rules, how to develop reports. Several hundred people every year become smarter with the help of our product, and I think it's great. Because I think that when you have the smarts, you can end up paying less for licenses, you can run slower hardware. Yeah, I remember a Cisco experience. So it's data search and data indexing that these guys do pretty well. And I think that the problem is that even well-trained people won't be able to do anything about it. If an engine is not good enough at efficiently indexing and searching for data, then it doesn't really matter if it's a structured or unstructured database. He will not be able to get a lot out of the system. How would you go about this problem? Well, our development guys in California keep improving the system. Last year, for example, they launched in-memory search so that you could expedite some searches by a factor of 1,000. And we did implement an updated log management solution in a telecom operator, and they reported on a 400 times increase in search speeds. Moreover, you can merge several nodes to speed up correlations, so products do get better over time. When you have several thousand users around the world, you do collect feedback. You learn enough to make your product better. Large-scale implementations are also good in terms of providing feedback.
Ну, соответственно, мы берем весь опыт, который нам предлагает продукт Elastica.
Now we capitalize on the Elastic products experience, but you say that you've reached the limits of Elastic, haven't you? This is what my developers tell me. Now, we had a slide here about billions of events. And I can tell you But we had cases when we would have, for example, 15 billion events, and Elastic does a pretty decent job of that.
Не знаю. Относительно правил корреляции и нормализации, да, то есть
A few words about correlation and normalization. And this is hourly data. I'm sorry, this is daily data.
Если это все сложить, 15 миллиардов...
Now, if you combine all that, then you will get to 15 billion in about 3 days, not a week. Well, we had 15 billion in a week. Okay, who cares? These are all unfiltered events, right? While I was referring to filtered events.
Когда он говорит, что вот по заданному фильтру я нашел 15 миллиардов событий. Я ему говорю, ищи дальше. Он это дальше поиск по-новому. Я скажу ему сгруппировать. Эту группировку будет обрабатывать.
And then I can tell the system to group this 15 billion events. It will take the system about maybe 5 minutes to group them all.
Функционал самого SIEM, да, как много у нас правил нормализации, не тормозят ли они вообще...
Well, the next question is how many normalization rules you have, because the more systems you have, the more normalization formulas you have, the slower your system can be expected to be. So we use common graphs with assigned weights to resolve this problem. So for every client, we would have a particular log behavior template. So for example, somebody's trying to spam our checkpoint. So we can have 2,000 or 10,000 events per second. And then they will be given higher weight in the graph. The way the normalization graph works, they will be the first to be shown and will have no impact on performance. Okay, thank you. We have only 12 minutes left, so let's run faster. Will 2 minutes be okay? This is a nice question for Splunk, but I can't really focus on it because I'm still thinking about the murder shares you showed and suicide rate. I think this is great analytics. We should talk to the author of this data. There should be something about it. Well, I can tell you that our analysts keep lugging their laptops around, and I think that the system is quite good at storing data in pretty small volumes. We already have over 160 patents for data storage, and Splunk didn't start out as a SIEM. We started out in unstructured data storage. 1.2 petabytes of data per day is a new record. So we no longer talk about Cisco, no?
1,2 петабайта, он не на Splunk.
Ой, ну ладно, нет, это не вы были там, это что, вот теперь день?
Нет, это...
Well, our log,
нашего SIEM-а.
the total log of our SIEM, is now 1.2 petabytes. Well, we index 1.2 petabytes per day. So the simple conclusion you can make here is that, well, they somehow manage it. Roman? Well, Curator has got its own unstructured, distributed database. So formally speaking, we shouldn't be exposed to any limitations as to the volume of data stored. Yeah, but I was asking about correlation and latency. It's a matter of architecture, isn't it? Well, I think a correlation is mostly, or correlation performance is mostly due to normalization. We also have self-cleaning mechanisms at work. For example, we have a system that will switch off the rules that are used inefficiently. Can you define that? Now, if I come up with a rule, will it be considered inefficient? There is an inbuilt audit system that will look at particular metrics in order to understand, in order to ascertain whether it's a good rule or not. If running a particular rule takes too much time, this rule will be disconnected, will be switched off, and the operator will be duly notified of that. So we teach people to write rules. Don't you find it weird that the system starts switching rules off because it feels they are endangering the system? It's a bit too much AI. Well, the rules are not switched off just like that. For example, you can get some events and they can be, for example, flawed. Maybe the system doesn't really properly process individual variables and that impacts the correlation rules. Well, then the system will essentially notify us that we need to change the way we collect logs because we keep getting distorted inputs. Moreover, the system gives you a report on the efficiency of individual rules. Easy to generate reports will tell you how long it takes you to collect a particular data set, how long it takes you to process it, and so on. And the more expensive resource-wise rules can be fine-tuned. Олеся?
Мы изначально постарались и стараемся, продолжаем делать систему масштабируемую и наращиваемую.
Well, from the outset, I wanted to develop the system as a scalable one. Well, there are obviously certain hardware limitations. So there will be a limitation for a particular server set, for example. So the number of fields you get per request, per query, and the way you set up your correlation rules and the way your analytical engine works will play a role. We use NQ and we use disk caching and data buffering in order to make sure we don't lose the data. For normalization to work, we enable the client to manage the flow of a particular event from a particular source. We're pretty flexible when it comes to correlations, so rules are often developed automatically, but then events are linked. So they saw that rule following the logic of a particular binary tree that you built. Well, in some machines, you certainly cannot process 15 billion events. In order to have short latency and faster search queries, we usually establish a cluster of databases. And in particular, for a particular request, the fastest or the most available node will serve it.
С момента получения SIEM-системной события самого до момента записи. То есть это некий отдельный процесс, который определит программные правила по всей цепочке.
And we also have a process that will run the whole correlation sequence while this is happening. I'm sorry, and if the system is busy, well, latency will obviously be longer, but MCTR is pretty low, I think. As regards data verification, particularly user input verification, we run an error log and normalization error log as well. We track the time it takes to apply correlation rules, and all these metrics are collected and displayed to users. And we try to provide the users with more tools to develop correlation rules. We're drawing this discussion to a close. Out of 29 questions I prepared, we only were able to discuss 6 or 7, not surprisingly, given the scale, the magnitude of the subject, and you have heard very different answers from different vendors, not surprisingly so. Most important conclusion I can make from this discussion is that you shouldn't really wait for a silver bullet to come from a SIEM vendor. If you do not understand the role a particular SIEM solution can play for you, well, it will be sold to you, make no mistake about that, but you shouldn't really expect a lot from it in terms of performance. If you want SIEM to become a process, not a standalone product, you need to have a very good understanding of what it can do for you. In conclusion, because we still have about 5 minutes left, I want every participant to make 2 or 3 statements about the potential impacts of SIEM implementation, key success factors in SIEM implementation. Well, if you implement a system like this, try looking at all the incidents through the lens of the system. That way, you will get what you want. Stay focused. Okay? Do not deviate. Do incident management. Develop a common core with the other divisions. Interaction via the SIEM system can be quite flexible and can make your response to incidents better. For example, an IT incident can impact you. And the final statement. Remember the same model? And I think Kiwi is a great example here. I'm really proud of the guys. So they develop their correlation rules, and then they pen test themselves, and then they update the system, and it's a cycle. I think this is the best role model for many of us. So keep looking for these loopholes. Keep checking whether the rules you've developed work or don't work, what else can be adapted. Actually, Kiwi shows that you do need pen testers and more than 10 analysts. Well, first, be realistic. First thing first, you need to identify what exactly you want to deliver. Second is that once you've set your eyes on an objective, go for it. We'll see how the system works, how the prototype works, collect feedback, update, and keep improving, keep training, keep learning. Because a system, even a good one, in the wrong hands will be a disaster. So you need to understand how the system works to make the most out of it. I think one statement will be enough in order to come up with an efficient SIEM. You need to go beyond the confines of SIEM. So you gotta see it as a bridge between you and the other departments. Goals, objectives, set them for yourself, set them for others. SIEM has been a trend in this country for the last 5 years. The number of successful implementations is not very high, to put it mildly. So make the vendor or integrator deploy a successful, effective log management first. They should start out by describing all your systems and all devices for you, because it will be very difficult for you to do it on your own, and that will require hundreds of people. Now, this is actually a very honorable moment. Yeah, but to be serious, you need to be realistic. Now, I usually talk for about 40 minutes about 15 years of ArcSight in Russia. People tell me, I want all that and now, and you have 2 months to deliver it all. This is not how things are done. Be realistic and go for something that conforms, so to speak, to your current maturity level. It can be log management, it can be correlation. If it is a correlation, it has to be important correlation. And then you also need to respond to all this stuff. If SIEM tells you something, if the correlation it gives you is useful, then do investigations, do postmortems. You might see, for example, that a particular rule has misfired, then focus on making it better. And by reacting to incidents, by running these investigations, you'll see what element of your work has already been automated. If you don't do the incidents, the effect of automation will be zero. If you investigate the incidents manually, you will see how much has already been automated by the vendor solution. SIEM is a good way of improving your skills. We all have our own development objectives, and I think that SIEM is a great way to develop analytical thinking capabilities. It is actually a great way of developing out-of-the-box thinking skills. And if you work with a vendor who has got a long history, like 15-year long history, you can learn very quickly from what they have done. Thank you very much. I also have 2 final statements. If all the products we've been discussing already are really good, ask for reference visits to happy customers or not so happy customers, to hear it from the customers, not from marketers. And do not implement anything without a pilot. SIEM is a sophisticated product, and you need a pilot to understand the plethora of risks and challenges you will run trying to implement it across the company. It's your responsibility, ultimately, so be highly skeptical about the things vendors tell you. Check and double check. I hope this has been a useful session. I hope you've made some important conclusions, and this is where we put the lid on it. Thank you very much.
Спасибо.